Who's ready to axe the tax? Who's ready to make common sense common? Who's ready to bring it home for Saskatchewan? Wow, is it ever great to be home on the prairies once again. Thank you very much to Premier Scott Moe for this wonderful invitation. It really does feel like a homecoming, Scott. As you know, my mom and dad were born right here in Saskatchewan. They were raised here, lived there their entire lives, right up into 1977. Mon père vient de Léoville, un village franc-saskoise, un fier village franc-saskoise. Il a transmis ses traditions francophones quand j'étais jeune. Il m'a dit que si j'étais capable de rédiger mon liste de Noël en français, le Père Noël allait être plus généreux. I was just saying in French for those small numbers in the room that didn't understand that. My father, who comes from Leoville, Saskatchewan, used to tell me when I was a kid if I could write my Christmas wish list in French, Santa Claus would be more generous with me. And my mother is from Saskatoon. Anybody here from Saskatoon? So we grew up enjoying summer vacations in Saskatchewan in places like Saskatoon and Unity, where my father's sisters, where my Aunt Rita is from, places like Aberdeen and Dalmany, beautiful farming communities. Of course, we were city kids from Calgary, so we would go and terrorize our farm cousins by taking their .22 rifles out and tearing around on their motorcycles and bouncing on their trampolines and trying to drive their combines very badly. I think they were relieved when we would finally go home. But it was always like Disneyland to be on the farm as a city kid with all these big machines and all of these wonderful adventures and the howling coyotes off in the distance. And so whenever I come back to Saskatchewan and enjoy that big, beautiful sky and incredible sunset, it brings back the best memories of my youth. Now, but for a small act of faith, I might not have been raised in Alberta. I might have been raised here, because I was born in '79, but my folks moved from Saskatchewan to Alberta in '77, 2 years beforehand. And the reason for that was the same reason that everybody was leaving at the time. They were refugees from the NDP, right? The sky-high taxes, the state-imposed poverty, the central planning that had left Saskatchewan's industry behind, forced many Saskatchewanians to head westward to Alberta. There was even that famous sign at the border, last one out, turn off the lights. And when I was growing up in Calgary, and we would go to a CFL game at McMahon Stadium, there would be more Rough Rider green than Stampeder red because of all of the economic migrants that had moved to Alberta, or maybe it was just the Calgarians that wished that they could cheer for the Rioters wearing that jersey. But the reality is that people were chased out of this province. From 1987 to 2007, the population actually shrunk. It might be the only province in the country in that time period with a shrinking population. And this was the direct result of socialist, state-controlled policies that deprived people of opportunity and drove them away for the chance to earn a powerful paycheck in a then province that was thriving on free enterprise, low taxes, and an open economy where hard work was rewarded by a conservative government that stayed out of the way and let people get ahead. And then all of a sudden, something changed in 2007, and that something was the Saskatchewan Party and the newly elected Brad Wall government. In the years that would follow, the Saskatchewan government brought in the biggest tax reduction in the province's history. Balanced budgets, opened up the economy, unleashed the unbridled power of the free enterprise system. The resource economy took off. Our farmers thrived and produced more. In the following years, the population of Saskatchewan grew by over 200,000 or 20%, making it one of the fastest growing places on earth. During that brief period where Alberta made the mistake of electing an NDP government, we saw migration back to Saskatchewan. And even the odd, brave soul who would show up to a CFL football game with a Stampeders jersey in Saskatchewan. We haven't heard from those people. They went missing. We don't know what happened to them. We're going to have to look into that, Scott. He's going to call an inquiry into that one. But we know what happened to them. But the reality is that the Saskatchewan Party changed the trajectory of the province and made this a land of opportunity. And it is incredible what you have achieved here. Think about it. This is the most affordable housing market in the entire country. It's incredible. Even with all the population growth, housing has remained affordable in Saskatoon and Regina, where it has doubled almost everywhere else. Paychecks are growing. Unemployment has been low. The Saskatchewan government, under the strong leadership of the common sense government of Scott Moe, has paid off $1.5 billion against the debt, which will act as a bulwark against future crises, strengthening the province's ability to protect its social programs. It has continued to cut taxes. We saw $40 billion of capital investment pour into this province in the last 2 years alone. The biggest investment, yes, give yourself a round of applause for that. That included the biggest investment by the biggest mining company in the world. Now, the people of Saskatchewan are reaping the benefits of these investments, not just through the powerful paychecks of the resource workers and the farmers who harvest these benefits, but the people of the province have better social programs as a result. Under this government, we have seen 15 schools open in 1 year alone. Isn't that true, Scott? 15 schools. Do you know in the last year of the NDP, they did not open a single solitary school. You've opened 35 health facilities in Saskatchewan. Under the NDP, in the 1990s, they closed 52 rural hospitals. Can you imagine that? Why would the party that prides itself on inventing Medicare shut down 52 hospitals in Saskatchewan? The answer is for the same reason that they didn't open any schools when they were in office the last time. And the same reason why the earlier federal Liberal government slashed health care by $20 billion. That reason? They were broke. Very simple. Because it doesn't matter what your intentions are. As Pythagoras said, in the end, numbers rule the universe. So our socialist friends can put hand on heart and tell us how much they care and all the wonderful things they are going to do. But when they bankrupt the Canadian people and the government and they run out of money, then what do? They slash and burn because that is what the numbers impose on them. The reason why Conservatives and the Saskatchewan Party are better able to protect our schools, our hospital, and our programs for the poor is because we have strong balance sheets that allow us to pay for it. And that is why it is so important to keep a common sense government here in Saskatchewan, not just so that the accountants can celebrate in looking at the balance sheet, but so that we can protect the most vulnerable and ensure that our cherished social safety net will always have dollars to fund it. And that takes a strong free market economy to do. And so I'm here today to say that a common sense Conservative government will build on these same solid foundations. We will unleash the free enterprise system, restore balance to our finances, reward hard work, harvest our resources, not just so that we can celebrate our strong balance sheet when we're attending some World Economic Summit, but so that we can provide the Canadian people with the best social programs anywhere on earth. So, now, I can see why out here today, with your common sense government and the sensible approach that you take to all the issues, you might feel isolated and alone. You might feel like there's no hope. There is this thing called Western alienation. But the good news is, the problem is not the rest of Canada. The problem is one man. We have one problem in this country with two words: Justin Trudeau. And when we fire him, we will bring home the Canada that we know and love. Now, just for a second, you might say, okay, that's a good political punchline, but is it really true? Well, think about it. What is he being forced to do? He's backtracking on the carbon tax. He's being forced to backtrack on his attack on our resource laws. He's forced to backtrack, temporarily anyway, on his massive hunting rifle ban. Not because he changed his mind, but because common sense Canadians in places like Atlantic Canada rose up to challenge him, which proves that you have a lot of allies from coast to coast to coast who think the same common sense thoughts as you do. And it is on those common sense values that we as a Conservative government will lead the country into a better future. Let's go through the common sense plan that we will bring forward that will make the values that you have here in Saskatchewan predominant right across the country. Let's start with the economy. Today in Canada, we have the fastest rising interest rates in monetary history. We know why this is happening: because of inflation. And why is inflation happening? The same reason it always happens. Government is creating more cash and faster than the economy is growing. In the last 3 years, the Trudeau government has increased the money supply from $1.8 trillion to $2.4 trillion to fund its deficits. That's a 32% increase in the number of coins, bills, and bank deposits in a period while the economy grew by 4%. So the cash is growing 8 times faster than the stuff that cash buys. If you got 10 loaves of bread and $10, it's $1 a loaf. Very simple, right? If it's all of a sudden you have $20 in the economy and you still have 10 loaves of bread, well, now it's $2 a loaf. More money bidding on the same or fewer goods always equals higher prices. The great economist Milton Friedman said, inflation is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. How do we reverse the inflationary spiral that Justin Trudeau's spending and deficits have caused? Well, we cap spending. We will be bringing in a common sense law called the dollar for dollar law. It works very simply. Every time the government brings in a new dollar of spending, by law, it will be required to find a dollar of savings to pay for it. In other words, we will run the finances of the country the way my mother ran our household finances. Instead of, if you want to go on a vacation right now, then you might have to delay that new porch you're building. Or you might go to the local construction yard and get some scrap lumber that's at a lower price to build your porch at a bargain while finding a deal on the vacation. But you have to come in under budget. That's how the Saskatchewan government has been able to balance the budget and pay off debt while building more schools and hospitals. Now, some people confuse cost with value. If you listen to Trudeau and the NDP, they brag about the cost of their programs. My program has more billions than your program. There's no other field in all of society that judges its success by how expensive it could be. Can you imagine a restaurant saying, come and dine with us. Don't worry about the terrible service, the ugly ambiance, or the bad food, but we'll charge you $500. It's the most expensive show in town, therefore it must be the best. That would be how a restaurant would advertise if it was using liberal NDP logic. Whereas real restaurants will say, no, we'll give you a low price and a good meal. That's the difference. I'll give you an example of where this played out. When I was the social development minister in the Harper government, we were sending out cassettes and CDs to the blind with recorded audio books on them so that they could enjoy an audio book. The Canadian National Institute for the Blind came and said, you know, we are in the 21st century. You could email these books to us. And by the way, you could sign a deal with other English-speaking countries to waive copyright so that they could get all of our recorded English books and we could get all of theirs. And in doing these two changes, we reduced the cost of the program by 80% while increasing the number of books available to the visually impaired by 400%. And we reduced the time they had to wait to get a book that they ordered from 1 week to about 7 minutes. Now, the Liberals would say this is a savage cut because it costs 80% less, because they measure everything by how expensive it is. I want to incentivize my ministers to go into the departments and root out waste, get more value for lower cost with a law that requires that they find savings every time they increase spending in another area. Because you've been pinching your pennies long enough, it's time government started pinching its pennies too. Then we're going to cut waste out of the system as well. We're going to get rid of the $54 million ArriveCan app. You imagine this app, an app we didn't need, didn't work, and cost about 500 times more than it needed to. As a lark, a couple of IT workers took a weekend with a few boxes of pizza and were able to redesign the app from scratch, and it didn't cost them $54 million. I'm going to send their version of the app to Justin Trudeau, and we'll call it the ResignCan app. But it's just another. Then there's a $35 billion infrastructure bank, which exists exclusively to guarantee the profits of large construction companies on major projects. So if they go over budget or fail to deliver on time, they'll get bailed out with taxpayers' money. I believe in a free market system where risk and reward go together. If a company succeeds, they should make a profit. But if they fail, they shouldn't get bailed out by the taxpayer. We're going to get rid of this $35 billion bank. We're going to stop sending our money out of this country to foreign terrorists, dictatorships, and multinational organizations that waste our money, and we're going to bring that money home for our people in Canada. And in so doing, we're going to balance the budget, which will allow us to bring down interest rates and inflation before the $900 billion of mortgage debt that is scheduled to renew ends up in a monstrous bankruptcy crisis. We are running out of time before this crisis occurs. $900 billion of mortgages coming up in 3 years, most of which will have increases in monthly payments of 60 to 70%. The only way to avoid catastrophe is to bring down interest rates and inflation before that happens, and only a conservative government can do it. And one of the ways we're going to bring down inflation is by axing the carbon tax. Who's on side with that? And this is where I want to give you all a big thanks on behalf of Canadians. It was the Saskatchewan government that led the charge from the very beginning against the carbon tax. That tax was coming in, and happily we had the great conservative leader Andrew Scheer leading the official opposition, who teamed up with Scott Moe and warned the nation that this tax would be a disaster. And through all of the years, as this tax was piling on, we had consistent leadership from Scott Moe fighting against it up until just yesterday, when his minister pulled together the other finance ministers to tell Chrystia Freeland the provinces are against this tax. And I know on Monday the premiers will meet again, and Scott Moe will be leading the charge to fight the Prime Minister and axe this tax. My constituents get it. South of Ottawa, there's a little farm. It's called Suntech Tomatoes. They have a greenhouse, the Little Miracles of Manotick. They pump CO2 into the greenhouse, and they're taxed on that, even though it's absorbed by the plant life. Apparently, Trudeau missed that day in science class. So the price signal that Trudeau sends the Manotick consumer is to buy the Mexican tomato, which doesn't have a carbon tax. So we're paying for the Mexican tomato to be transported by truck and train, burning fuel, all the way across the continent rather than buying the more environmentally friendly local tomato. This is exactly the logic they're using to attack farmers with a fertilizer ban. They want to reduce your fertilizer use by 30%, which will reduce output per acre, forcing the tractor and combine to travel over longer distances, ironically burning more fuel, leading to higher food prices and requiring Canadians eat more and more food imported from abroad. We in the Conservative Party will not only axe the tax for our farmers, but we will get rid of this mandate so that we can grow more food per acre, we can be more self-sufficient, we can stand on our own feet and feed our own people in this country. Secondly, we are going to bring home powerful paychecks to our people in Canada. That means doing what the Saskatchewan government has done, lowering income taxes so that you bring home more of each dollar you earn and hard work pays off once again. We have a war on work in this country. A single mom in Ontario earning $60,000 a year with 3 kids who earns another dollar loses 80 cents to clawbacks of her child benefit and income taxes, payroll taxes, gas taxes to get to work. If she's earning $25 an hour, she keeps 5 of those $25. $5 is not even minimum wage. No one should be expected to work for that. A Poilievre government will reform the clawbacks and cut income taxes so people bring home more of each dollar they earn and hard work actually pays off. But we need to have jobs in the first place. And that means bringing home more of our resource production to this country. Justin Trudeau has been determined to create more and more jobs in Russia, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, but not here in Western Canada or across this country. His unconstitutional bill C-69 has attacked our resource sector and made us more helpless and reliant on the rest of the world. Do you ever think about how oil prices go up, but our dollar doesn't move? Used to be they'd move in tandem. It was almost like $1 in oil prices equaled 1 penny in our exchange rate. So if we were at $100 a barrel, we'd be at parity with the Americans. But because Trudeau has attacked our energy sector, we no longer have the same ability to move our dollar strength up as the oil price rises. And what does that mean? Higher prices for us as consumers. Because oil is an internationally priced commodity. When our dollar is weak, we have to pay more for that oil, and that means higher prices at the pump. So it hurts the worker who loses the chance to produce the oil, and it hurts the consumer who pays more to use it. So my common sense plan repeals the unconstitutional and unfair anti-pipeline law C-69 and replaces it with a law that consults First Nations, protects our environment, but gets projects built, including pipelines, here in this country. Bring it home. And it's not just oil. It's also our 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. The world needs gas in order to clean its electricity production in places like Asia and to break dependence on foreign dictatorships. Now, the German Chancellor and the Japanese Prime Minister came asking Trudeau for some of our gas, and he said, "Oh, there's no business case. Why don't you call the Kremlin and ask Putin? He'll give you all the gas you need." Well, nobody told the Americans there's no business case. They built 7 massive liquefaction facilities in the last decade. Nobody told the Qataris. They doubled their production and just signed a 3.5 million ton per year supply agreement with France that we could have provided. Nobody told Vladimir Putin, who continues to fund his war using sales of natural gas, and no one told the Germans, who built an import terminal from concept to completion in 194 days. My friends, when Trudeau took office, we had 18 proposed liquefaction facilities on the table. Not one has been completed. I will endorse those projects because we are the best suited to produce it. In fact, we have the best climate. How do you liquefy gas? You cool it down. What do we have in Canada? Cold weather. In fact, I'm told it gets so cold in Regina that when Justin Trudeau was here, he was seen with his hands in his own pockets. There won't be any jokes about your dog running away for 3 days, though, I promise. But what we're going to do is simple. We're going to approve these natural gas liquefaction projects, cool that gas down to minus 161 degrees Celsius, ship it off to Asia to shut down dirty Asian electricity plants, ship it off to Europe to break European dependence on Putin and Qatar, and turn dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people back in this country. And we're going to fight climate change exactly the opposite way that Justin Trudeau does. He believes in making traditional energy we still need more expensive. I believe in making alternatives more abundant and affordable. And we have those alternatives right here in Saskatchewan, with the biggest supply of uranium anywhere on Earth. Companies like Cameco. And we have the nuclear engineers in Ontario, where we get about 55% of our electricity from nuclear. We have Corey Tucker, Member of Parliament here in Saskatchewan, who's Parliament's leading expert on nuclear energy, who's busy writing my plan right now. It shouldn't take 15 years to get a nuclear power plant approved. It shouldn't take 20 years to get small modular reactors approved. We don't have to turn ourselves into Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. Well, but what are we going to learn in year 15 of an environmental or safety review that we couldn't learn in year 1? Let's do all the safety protections and the environmental reviews, but let's do it in 3 or 4 years rather than 15 or 20, so that Saskatchewan can help power the world with nuclear and we can create jobs for our people doing it. And, you know, I thought for a sec, Scott, I might skip the part on housing. I talk about housing everywhere I go, but I thought, why talk about that in the place where housing is more affordable than anywhere else? And there's 2 reasons I'm going to address it. One, because I want to give you a warning of what can happen if you don't have a Saskatchewan Party government here. Across Canada, under Justin Trudeau, housing costs have doubled. It now takes 25 years to save up for a down payment for a home in Toronto. Vancouver is now the 3rd most overpriced housing market in the world when you compare median income to median house price. You can now literally buy a 20-room castle in Scotland for a lower price than a 2-bedroom in Kitchener, Ontario. That is life after 8 years of Justin Trudeau. And in places across this country, we have tent cities. We have campgrounds that are now permanently occupied with middle-class carpenters and nurses who can't afford a home. That is what happens when you allow government gatekeepers to block construction. In Canada today, it now takes 60% of an average family's monthly income to make payments on the average monthly home. But in Saskatoon and Regina, it's 30%. In other words, the amount of money you have to spend monthly on your housing in Saskatchewan is half of the national average. Why is that? It's not because the population hasn't grown. You've had some of the most impressive population growth. It's because you can get things built in Saskatchewan. Everywhere else, here, Scott has made it so that there are fast building permits. And builders want to build, they get a chance, they get a yes. They don't have to wait 7 or 8 years. The building permits add $1.2 million to the cost of every newly built home in Vancouver, $350,000 to every newly built home in Toronto. Quebec has blocked 24,000 homes. Winnipeg tried to block 2,000 homes right next to a transit station that was built specifically for those homes. These gatekeepers across the country are preventing people from getting homes to live in. My common sense plan will link the number of dollars cities get from the federal government to the number of homes they allow to be built. I'm going to pay city bureaucracies their federal transfer like real estate agents get paid, on volume. They'll be required to boost home building by 15% per year or get less federal money. But if they beat the target, they'll get more money. And it will be strictly in proportion to the amount by which they beat or missed the target. Can you imagine that? Paying for results rather than just paying for bureaucracy. In other words, we want to take Scott's common sense approach to get government out of the way and bring homes that you can afford. Nationwide, that's our plan, and we want those homes to be in safe neighborhoods. We know that safety is not going to result from harassing farmers in Unity, Saskatchewan. We know that banning licensed, law-abiding, trained and tested sports shooters is not going to end the shootings in downtown Toronto. And yet Trudeau and the NDP want to ban your hunting rifle. Let's be very blunt about this. If Trudeau and the NDP are re-elected, they will ban all civilian firearms ownership. They've said so. This is not an allegation. Trudeau said he wants to ban hunting rifles. He published a 300-page list of hunting rifles he tried to ban. The only reason he backed down is because we put the pressure on him and he knew he was going to lose. But if, God forbid, he and the NDP were ever given the chance, they would come after your guns and ban you from your ability to harvest a living and a sustenance from nature, or to responsibly use your property. Common sense conservatives will put violent criminals in jail, and we will leave our lawful sport shooters and firearms owners alone. We will bring in jail and not bail for repeat violent offenders, and we will bring in treatment and recovery, not tax-funded narcotics, so that we can bring our loved ones home drug-free. And finally, it's important to say this. As a born and bred prairie boy from the West, I will stand up for Western Canada. When I am Prime Minister, the era of Ottawa telling Western Canada to pay up and shut up will be over once and for all. When we hear Goody Hutchins, the Prime Minister's Rural Affairs Minister, say that you would get a pause on the carbon tax pain if you had elected more Liberals, we see the bloody-minded divide-and-conquer strategy of Justin Trudeau. But we also see that it's false, because they did elect Liberals in Northern Ontario, and they're forced to pay the carbon tax on the home heat. They did elect Liberals in Manitoba, and they're forced to pay the carbon tax on their heat as well. We know that the solution, if you don't want a carbon tax, is not to elect more Liberals, it is to elect more common sense conservatives, right? Common sense conservatives. Common sense conservatives that will bring home our freedom. That includes repealing the censorship law C-11 and the other censorship law that has made news disappear from the internet, C-18. It means attaching conditions to federal money for universities. They will have to uphold Section 2B Charter rights of freedom of expression if they want to get federal money. If they don't like what Jordan Peterson has to say, well, they can debate him. Good luck with that. But they can't shut him down, because a Poilievre-led government will require freedom of expression on our university campuses. We will ensure that there are no more federal mandates, no mandated federal digital ID. There will be no central bank digital currency. We will allow you to make your own decisions with your own body, with your own opinions, and with your own money in the freest country on earth. What I'm talking about here, my friends, is restoring the common sense consensus of Canada. What I didn't mention at the outset is that I was born to a 16-year-old unwed mother who put me up for adoption to the two school teachers I told you about earlier. And they raised me to believe that in Canada, it didn't matter where you came from. It mattered where you were going. It didn't matter who you knew. It mattered what you could do. And that's the country my wife came to as a refugee. It's the country we want for our kids and yours. It's the country that Scott believes in and is allowing to happen here in Saskatchewan. Really, what I'm talking about is giving every single young person born in this country the opportunity that I had to start from modest beginnings and do great things. That is the story of the prairies, of people coming to break a difficult and unforgiving land in order to build a prosperous future for themselves and their families. Here in God's country, Western Canada, the freest nation on earth. It is the common sense of the common people united for our common home. Your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we